Okay. Hi, everybody. Dan Sands, Managing Director of Factor 7 Medical. Thanks for joining today. Look forward to having this an engaging conversation around maximizing capital, leveraging fractional resources in your organization. So to start off, I'm going to get a little background about myself and kind of the why for the topic, introduce the panel, and get into some questions about this topic and leave time for a question and answer at the end. So just a show of hands, what's the makeup? How many early stage companies or founders in the room? Okay. How many investors?
Investors are like, I don't know. I'm not going to put my name.
Any strategics in the room? All right.
And who are the rest of you guys? I'm just wondering.
Yeah.
Yeah. There you go. There you go. There you go.
Yeah. So just a little bit about myself. I've been in medtech 34 years. I've started and led 7 different companies. Early in my career, it was for established companies that I was involved in starting up divisions that grew quickly, 1 to 20 million in 8 years. I started another division that went to 15 million in 3 years. So I'm like, wow, this is a piece of cake. I got the startup stuff down. I started a solo venture in 2006 and ran that for 10 years and really found out that it's not that easy. Raising capital, finding the right resources at the right time to scale, being capital efficient, all of that. So through all that old journey, and then in 2016 started consulting, and taking some fractional CEO positions. And again, learning from past, come on up.
And we have a guest.
We have a guest speaker too. So through that journey, just understanding what it takes as a fractional and getting resources to get engaged in an high-risk venture early stage and getting the right people is part of the essence of why we started Factor 7 Medical. It started with 7 of us. We got really creative in the naming. We wanted to be a factor in company success. Now over 300 consultants across the country, that high expertise of all people that we know and trust and have worked with throughout our career, which is a differentiator when, it's a trust environment and it's high risk of making sure you have the right people involved in an early stage company. So that's the essence of Factor 7, and we provide consulting services across the full life cycle, early stage all the way up to companies that are 100 million in revenue. So about this topic, maximizing capital, being really efficient, and it really comes from the underlying concept of investors invest in people. It's just, I've had over the years, several investors say, I would rather invest in a C technology with an A team rather than a C team and an A technology. And so that underlying principle has led us here today, and we'll talk more about that. Before we get into like the 3 main categories around demystifying fractional, the good, the bad, the ugly of it, and what does that mean from a investor perspective and really being capital efficient? So that's kind of the layout. We'll get into some questions and leave time for Q&A. So with that, thank you for the guests on the panel here. And Christine, since you're like coming in here, we'll let you go first. Introduce yourself and we'll get into some questions. Yeah.
So sorry about that. Christine Horton, CEO of Visura Technologies. So I won't delay anymore. I'll just leave it at that and introduce myself along the way.
John Brumfield, CEO, Berlin Heels, 20 years medtech and 5 months in this role. So I'm happy to share how I used some fractional leadership in growing my early team.
Sure. Heath, Naquin, Vice President of Government Capital Engagement at the Science Center in Philadelphia. Probably a different role. I don't have a C in my title, so that there's that. But we do a number of programs and activities focused on helping companies in their early stages of capital formation and like growth and positioning for investment, and operate a number of different investment vehicles ourselves. So sort of have both sides of that, and we can talk more about that as we get into it.
Good, very good. George Makhoul, CEO of Dilon Technologies. I've been in the healthcare space for almost 25 years and had a good balance of large companies like Genzyme and Stryker, and I've been on the smaller medtech side for the last 6 years.
Awesome. So let's get into some questions. So, and answer whoever feels comfortable, just answer away. So why fractional versus traditional hiring? And can you have the best of both worlds? That's kind of the first part of it. And at what stages do you consider bringing on a
And I
fractional?
can do a filler question for the audience real quick.
Sure, yeah.
So for the late comers, we had a little question. Who here's with a founding team, a startup team? Don't be shy. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
In your pitch deck, do you have a bunch of people on there that show all your amazing expertise and your board of advisors that are not really advisors, but kind of advisors and sort of attached? Right? Okay. So, I mean, this stuff happens, right? But then you scratch a little bit, and that's where this question really comes up. So now that I've bought the panel time, Christine.
Yeah.
So we use both, and we have used both all along, full-time FTEs and fractional. And we, honestly, our fractional folks have been with us, and they are on my slides, and they're on my org chart as part of my team. When we have our executive leadership meetings, they are part of my executive leadership meetings. When we have our summer fun days and we go boating on Lake Minnetonka in Minneapolis, because that's where we're based, they are included in that. And they are like truly part of our team. We have added more fractional people as we have gone along, and we have added more FTEs as we've gone along. And that really is based off of, a couple of criteria, which is salespeople are not fractional people. So that decision is really an easy one for us as far as, are they FTEs or are they fractional? Do I need a full-time CFO? I don't. I've done a lot of financing, know a lot of that, but so a fractional CFO makes sense. Same thing on the regulatory side. We've got our clearance, we're a 510K. We've done a couple letters to file. So that's been an easy decision for us as well. So it's been a easy decision for us on that, for Visura, but we've balanced it pretty well. And on the finance side, it's really helped us quite a bit too. And our investors have liked it. So that would be, it's an easy answer for us.
Oh,
Yeah,
cool.
I think it depends too, is you're a CEO, you go in your organization and you're going in there with a certain set of expertise that you're very comfortable with. And I think you go in there and you look at what do you have on your team and what are the dynamics, because you may not need fractional help immediately, but if you come in and you have to make personnel changes or if you have departures, then you start to look at, okay, what's your level of replacing that talent? How good are you through that interview process? Because you can only work with if you use retained search or your referral network for so far, but then you have to figure out what are your needs going to be. And then that's where you can start to assess, okay, should we bring in somebody full-time? Should we bring in a consultant? And I think there's just different ways to package that. And it's helped us a lot, especially on the R&D side in our organization, where when I came into it, there had been some turnover in R&D, probably 3 cycles of teams. And there were a lot of changes made to our products. So we really needed some good expertise who could come in there and stabilize what we had as a continuing sustaining engineering project. So, and then that leads to the evolution of other things you may encounter: project management, full-time leadership, potentially 4 different roles on the team. And I think that's where you can start to have that good dialogue of, okay, what makes sense for us? And then if you have a good partner, I happen to use Factor 7 for part of our fractional work. And they actually were so gracious enough to actually help us go through the search process as we were looking for our next R&D hire, which was like another set of eyes for things that maybe my expertise would not have been able to assess every little detail that they would ask certain questions. So there's a lot of different ways to use fractional help, and I think you have to be thinking about it from all angles.
Yeah. Before we go to John, just in terms of that cost of attrition and having the wrong people, and maybe at the not opportune time it happens. So can you put a measure on that? I mean, have you anecdotally, is like, in the eyes of investors, how big of an impact?
Well, Dan, you bring up a good point, right? So everybody here, how many people here are profitable right now? So I assume everyone here.
Oh,
Okay, low number, right?
Yeah.
So cash burn, right? You talk about some of the other panels is critical. And you think about all the things your investors care about, right? They're not sitting in the room with you thinking about, okay, hey, I got to build this great culture and we got to have this good team. And they want you to do that, right? And they're on board with it. But at the same time, you got to sell and get things moving. So what is going to be your hurdle for time? So if the fractional can speed that up for you, you need to take action on that if it's going to work out well for you. If it's a few dollars more here or there, as much as it might be a painful discussion for you with your investors or your board, if they're watching closely everything you spend your line items on, you're going to be able to message that back and how you're going to get speed to market. Because at the end of the day, they're going to forget about the $10 or $20 or $30,000 extra it might have cost for that same transaction, right? Because the end result at the end of the day is what they really want to see. So if you can prove that out, I mean, for us in particular, it saved us months of work, months. And I think it probably would have translated to something else that's not tangible, which is longer term, because had we made a mistake up front, then the time to unwind that individual or individuals and the project and the work, you just get so far behind. It could set you back years. And think about it in our world, right? There's an expiration on all of us as leaders of companies. So we have to make good decisions right away.
Yeah.
John, your perspective?
Yeah. So I would say I've used this function specifically in the finance side of my company. The company's been around for 10 years. I came in 5 months ago and looked at the organization and thought, how do we make this more efficient? How do we escalate it? It's a European-based company, but we need to focus on FDA. We need to focus on other countries. And so I was looking at a multinational expansion over the near term. And from a controlling bookkeeping standpoint, we had somebody doing that, but it wasn't at the strategic level. And so if I want to think about where do I want to set my headquarters up and how do I do a funding round and look at debt versus equity and that next strategic level, I thought about, do I just bring on a CFO as a kind of a consultant and just advise? But I found pretty quickly that I needed this kind of strategic thinking on a regular basis. So a day a week, maybe 2 4-hour days a week kind of thing. So now I have a fractional CFO that supports all my board presentations, supports my strategic planning, oversees our current controlling function, and they're doing the audits. So they're working on where's the accounting in different countries. But I am also bringing on a full-time CFO. So through that work, we came up with the discussion that, we actually need a full-time CFO at this point. So he helped me with that decision-making. And I also see it as it's a relationship that I plan on continuing even after I hire a CFO, because there's going to always need to be continued support. So it gives you that flex where if my current CFO slammed on a capital deal and we still need to work on closing the books in the year, I might need to bring on that fractional maybe back on a little bit more than before. So it's a really nice flex for us.
Hey, question for you just to follow up on that. Did you feel like now having that fractional person has set your organization up so now when you go to recruit and hire a full-time CFO, you actually have something maybe stood up for getting maybe a more higher caliber individual to come take over? They don't have to build it up from the ground up.
I also put the fractional in my interview panel.
Yeah.
So it was CFO to CFO got to speak, and he got to ask them, unscripted questions about, so where are we in the state of affairs, and how are you setting up this budget? I see you're changing your accounting company in Switzerland, but Germany is still this other one. They can have that conversation way better than I can.
Yeah, right.
So it was super helpful from a recruiting and evaluating side.
Yeah, very good.
So I was going to talk a little bit about slightly earlier stage companies for a minute. And so I think everybody knows this, but the cost of a bad hire is like exponential, right? I mean, everybody knows this. Yeah. When you talk about from an investor perspective, you as a 1 or 2 person founding team, and so often, like in our programming, we're helping companies in that $1 to $5 million raise. So it's a little in there. They're in their early gestational areas. Hey, I know a guy, or I have a friend, and the legal's not clear, and all that sort of stuff's happening. And that's back to that board of advisors thing I brought up earlier. So they get their first chunk of money. They start onboarding people they kind of know. And then next thing you know, they have to completely explode the company because it's not right. And it doesn't fit. Investors are asking questions. I've heard horror stories. The worst I've heard was that it cost $4 million to get rid of an intern. One intern at the wrong time. For a number of reasons, which I'll not get into here. I will only do it over drinks. But you want to start quantifying the thing of a bad hire and not bringing the right talent at the right time. That's a bad thing. And you talk about it from an investment perspective. It's, just so we're clear, money's a little tight, right? And I mean, right now. And so talking about how do you be super efficient and communicate that to the investment community as you're asking for money and having it with some authority that these aren't just people, a guy or people I know. These are people that are integrated parts of my team in a capital efficient manner. Now that, all right, we can have a conversation, right? And so just wanted to put some scary numbers around things going sideways. So.
Yeah. Well, the reality is if you're in a capital constrained situation, difficult raising capital, to attract the right talent, to pull them away from other more stable employment options. I mean, I went through that dynamic as I wanted these people that really had the expertise to move the dial, but we're just at a stage in the company that you don't have the capital runway, the uncertainty of raising capital, development delays, et cetera. So you sit there and go, okay, do I compromise and bring in somebody that's less caliber, less money? So there's always that dynamic of the capital at play. So to that end, on more of the kind of the HR related compensation, and then the dynamics of introducing fractional to maybe some established team members that have been maybe legacy, longer term. Have you dealt with any situations where, hey, I have to explain this away to not, ruin the culture that you're trying to develop, but how do you augment and navigate through, the compensation and just the cultural dynamics and attracting the right people to your organization? You want to touch on that one?
Sure. Well, I think it goes back to where I started, which is they're part of my leadership team. So my fractional folks are all executive level people for the most part. So by having them part of the executive team, I establish expectations, right? That's on me, which means everybody on my team knows that they report to me. This is the expectation. I also think that I don't ever want to be the smartest person. I am not that smart, actually, quite frankly. Like, I'm not very smart. I know that. So I want smarter people with expertise in other areas to be standing shoulder to shoulder with me. I don't want to know regulatory that much. I want to know enough to know if you're very good at your job, if you're going to get me through, if it's actually a letter to file or we should be doing a 510K. I've been doing this 33 years and I know if you know what you're talking about or not. I want to know that our quality system is going to get us through an audit or not. I know enough to know that, but I don't want to know what the quality system, I don't want to know what the documents are. That's not my job. I'm the CEO. I need to raise the money. I need to make sure everybody, everything is moving, that I talk to corporate counsel, that the board is happy, investors are happy. So I need to know what the expertise are. And a lot of times that comes down to what you said in the culture, and that the fractional people are just part of that culture. They're part of the thread of what we're doing every single day. And so if there's, something that's not jiving, then it's the same as if two FTEs are not jiving. It's the same expectation that you have, that you need to work it out. You need to figure it out. You're executives. That's how the performance should be. As far as compensation, I'll let somebody else answer that one.
Well, in terms of like retainer-based, project-based, is it, each situation different? I mean, from a competitive standpoint of alternative things that you could do is a direct subcontract to a firm, or retaining somebody on directly as a fractional versus hiring.
I will say this one, after somebody's been with us for 6 months as a fractional person, they do get equity in the company. So if you have been with us for 6 months and you have performed, there is a small equity component that will come with you staying. And if you're not there after 6 months and you're not a part of our organization, and you've either exited or you're a long-term person, because now you have a reason to, be a part of what we're doing. And so that is a little bit different, I think, than what a lot of companies do, but I do consider you that much a part of the team, and I expect that much elevated performance out of people.
Just to give a quick proxy on this, I mean, I sort of equate this in some way to legal, right? There's a difference between having a lawyer and working with a firm, right? Especially when you're trying to look at things like the last panel was around IP, right? If you talk to a lawyer, they may be able to file stuff for you. But if you're at a firm, even though it may be slightly more expensive, they can usually have on their bench somewhere an expert that can actually help you with your claim writing and doing it in a more efficient manner. So just talking about a little bit about the delta, if you will, between working with an individual as a consultant versus working with a firm, that's one area. And then two, another thing to think about is if things are going wrong, it's a lot easier to hot swap something out if you're working with a firm versus working with the guy you met at the bar over there, and then you got to get rid of him and whatever, right? So just want to point out a couple of those things. And
that's good. We can talk more in detail offline about compensation, how you structure some of those things out. But if there's people in the room who are doing fractional work or looking for that, I think, again, I'm sure some people think there's someone's going to be short term and then they end up being someone you need longer, right? And there's ways to structure, I think, negotiations to figure out what that looks like for how it's going to impact your budget, right? I mean, it's they're a business also. So I think we have to think about what are the different pieces of the puzzle you're trying to put together, and then you start to budget that with what you're going to be spending for that bit. I mean, there's all kinds of ways to structure it. I think you have to also think you can be creative with that. It's not always fixed.
Yeah, I'll add real quick. When I think of like a HEMA project, so you need to do a market assessment to figure out what the reimbursement landscape is, and that's like a known project with a beginning and an end. That's a consultant in my mind. But something that you need support structuring the next month, the next quarter, the next raise, there's going to be a raise right after that. Now you're looking at someone that's durable, that's going to stay with you for a while. And the question is, can you hire someone and can you afford someone that has 20 years experience and worked with 15 different med tech companies? My interim or my fractional CFO, I call him interim, my fractional CFO, he sits down with the team and says, here's the spreadsheet I've used with these clients. Here's how we can adjust it. I've taken your spreadsheet and adjusted it. And when there's resistance from my team about, well, that's not how we've done it before, he's used to this. He's used to coming into an environment where the company has a culture and he can't come in and just change it all, but he can show them, here's how I do it at 5 other firms that I work with and why it works really well. And so that expertise and knowledge, yes, I only get them 2 days a week, but it really brings, I couldn't afford them 5 days a week, but I get that level of professionalism for what I need it for.
But you bring up a great point, right? 2 things in there. One is the fractional is there for the reason of, because it's the way you've always done it, we need something new and different, right? And also sometimes your fractional person doesn't want to become an FTE. That's why they're doing fractional work. So things to think about.
Yeah. Just in terms of any situations that weren't so positive or good, what were kind of any underlying elements or what to look out for in evaluating somebody for a fractional role? It's all sunshine. Yeah. So
I mean, we've had a handful where it wasn't great. And again, there's things that you don't know. And sometimes the firm you're working with doesn't always 100% know what you feel great about the people they're bringing to you because it's in their network and it's people that they know and it's people that they trust. But sometimes certain things happen with the individual that maybe it's been a longer time since they've worked with them directly and you find out that they're just not really delivering what you need. I think if you've got a good firm who's helped you place the fractional, they feel really responsible and want to take ownership on that and they want to make it right for you. So you just have to be vocal up front and don't just absorb that lack of performance because it's what you have, right? I think it's like you talked about earlier, you can pull the ripcord and you can make the adjustment, you can be okay.
Yeah. I'll build on that slightly because we often work with a lot of early stage companies, as I mentioned, in a number of our programs. And ultimately, It's a little bit of what you said about where, you can correct for the right fit and make sure the culture works and all those sorts of things. But oftentimes for founders, they don't know exactly what they need yet, to be quite honest, right? And so they're saying, I need a CFO. But what they really need is a regulatory person at that moment, right? Before, so they can even get to the investment round to happen. And so there's a part of this where if you're working with a group that can take the time to get to know you as a founder a little bit and be like, hey, just letting you know, you might want to think about X first. That's a valuable thing to have, because often, at least at the early stage, whatever you think is going to happen, it may not be the talent you need right that moment. Later on, it becomes a little easier to plan. You're moving, and that's slightly different, although it's not always the case, but that's something to bring up. So.
Yeah, so I have another fractional group that I use for FDA support, and I have to part ways with that partner, and I have to explore a new partner. So now I'm here at LSI meeting with supporters in this space because I'm evaluating who can fill that gap. And so that's on FDA, but clinical, in vulnerability sharing where I am in my company, we're preparing for designing a pivotal trial. I have no idea at this point if it should be 100 patients or 500 patients. So I need to sit with my clinicians and we need to talk about what are the endpoints, but I need heme at the table. I need regulatory at the table. I need these people, and I don't have that expertise today. So am I going to go out and hire the Medtronics and the Bostons and the Abbott experts? I can't afford that. So I could also hire consultants to do this. And then the question is that continuity through the life cycle of what I need? But I think I'm leaning more and more on going fractional for some of these functions.
Yeah, Victor.
Yeah, as a founder, I look at things a little bit different. And a startup quite advanced, very advanced as compared. And this is the first time I learned about the fractional executives as such. Not that I haven't not used them as consultants, but what's in for the fractional CEO that brought me to a unicorn, what's it for him? So how does that move from a part-time, and I would do that because I can't afford to write this guy a check, and it's probably worth a full-time salary of a couple of to 300 grand to start, but I don't have that.
Right.
So the solution that you guys discuss is attractive to me, but I ask myself, what's in for this guy?
Yeah. Great question. I've had a fair amount of experience in this, in taking some fractional CEO roles myself. So it's a combination, and over the years, I've kind of, come to the denominator that, you can be allocated equity, but again, if certain milestones aren't hit, that equity potentially is zero. So it's very high risk to attract the right CEO, the right, all the, I call it the DNA of that person to bring them in. Do they have the expertise? Do they have the network? Do they have, because at that point, as a founder, you're getting married to this person, I equate it to. And it's certainly in the eyes of investors, and it's a good topic because we're going to cover, how is this viewed in the eyes of investors? And to make sure that who you have at the table with you to develop in the early stage is the right person. So there's different ways to structure it, cash, equity, but my preferred is, there's got to be some execution and milestones that are not going to put the founder in a bad situation come 6 months later, and the dial has not been moved. So again, that's the part where we're trying to, in a model, and especially in capital constrained times, you have to be very smart, because the perseverance and the longevity of somebody to hang with you. And if you're turning over a CEO to another, that starts to have a bad reflection. Well, geez, is it the technology? Is it the founder? Is it this? It starts to create a lot of questions for investors. So I would just say there's a lot of effort in verifying you have the right person, and then how to compensate. Anybody else want to comment on that? Another question?
So somewhat along these lines is there is another option. It's a little off topic, but when you find that C-suite executive, we really want this person, we can't pay them until we raise capital. What do you do in terms of the amount of equity you give them as compared to a fractional person? What do you give a fractional person on equity compared to someone who's working for, working until a capital raise to come on full time?
Something like that.
I don't have that direct experience that you're describing. I know that from what we do just for our fractional people, we give them significantly less than FTEs, right? So just more of a token of what
Like
we
an
give our
advisor would get or something.
Yeah, we just, just like our FTEs get substantially more than what our
So they're getting paid some cash because they're on a part-time basis, and this is a token that says you're appreciated, you're part of the team.
you recognize.
And if they're working for 5 companies or one of them hits,
Right.
it could be worth something.
It could be, exactly. And it's more of a incentive to, we recognize what you're doing. Now you need to recognize that, like, if I ask you and you got 5 companies that you're working for, I do want a little bit more. I want to be prioritized because this is what I'm giving you too. So, there is a little bit more of that, right? I am asking for something. So yeah, that's our experience. It's not on the CEO side.
Just to be really clear, a clarifying question. You're saying pre-first round investment. That's what you're talking about, right? All right. So first statement I want to say is, and just to put some ranges in here, when we talk about an advisor, like a true, not one of the fake ones I mentioned earlier, but a true advisor, you're usually looking like half to up to 3%, depending on what they're giving to you. And that's like 3 is a little crazy, honestly, at this point. One of the key components of that, which we haven't really talked about, is that still has to be inked. That still has to have a vesting schedule. That still has to be earned. It's not just you just give away your stock certificate, say, ta-da. There has to be all the corporate governance elements in place for that. And I just want to make sure that's very clear. And this is why it's very important. We talk about these fractional roles, that you as a company are able to, A, know that you need to do that, to your point. But 2, are working with a group that ideally, like, hey, you need to make sure that you have your stuff in order and all that sort of thing. We got some non-competes. We have vesting, all those sorts of things on that, right? So just wanted to raise that point because that is a key thing. So
I won't beat the topic up too much, but
do it.
There's not really a cookie cutter answer to this question because there's so many different variables that would have to go into place for that, even for your own company, your own structure, right? So again, how much equity do your investors want to give away? That's a big part of that. And then if you're the fractional individual or the person who wants to be working for you full time, how much of that will get diluted over time, right? So there's so many different ways to slice that. And then also, what type of talent are you getting if someone's willing to work just for equity, right? You have to figure out, that's a much smaller profile you're going to find because you're going to have to find someone who's probably been there, done that. And financially, they're probably not needing to have a regular steady income. So there's just so many different variables that you're going to have a hard time finding one standard answer for. But
I will build on this.
Yeah.
You get what you pay for. So paying in equity, that's cool. It's just like legal. I see people going the cheap all the time. It always costs twice as much to fix the damn problem later. Always.
And there's
Not to say it can't happen, but it's just a thing.
Yeah.
there's generally some pretty acceptable ranges that early stage, especially early stage pre-revenue, you got a founder that maybe is a clinician, and you're coming in basically to take that on. So, in that scenario, there just has to be a justification for that commitment as literally almost as a co-founder coming in. So those equity ratios are going to probably be particularly higher in that situation, milestone and hitting key things. But in structuring those, you obviously have to be careful what happens if that person leaves or they don't hit milestones in transition. So it's good to have that everything documented, of course, legal review. And then, just having a capital pro forma in terms of how much is going to be set aside and allocated for as an equity incentive pool in total. Just on the total cap table, it's really good to plan that out. It's good for the founders. It's good for the investors because they see it's like they know they need good people. They want good people. It's not a mystery that, hey, it's we're not going to incentivize it. We absolutely have to incentivize, especially in the degree of risk that's involved in some of the technology and getting it to market. So there's a wide swath. There's a lot of variables like risk, tenure, key milestones. All those things have to come into play. Good question. Any other questions? So anecdotally, one thing that I've run into, and it's one of those catch-22s. You see the pitch deck, you see all these advisors. That could be to your advantage. That hey, it's building credibility. But on the flip side, surprisingly, I've had investors on a couple examples, a company's well-stacked team. They're not all actively engaged, but the perception is, wow, that's an expensive. How much capital are you giving away? This is expensive. Why are you asking for so much money? Are these people getting paid? So I would just say, hey, be careful on who you put on that. Make sure they're in agreement to be referenced on your slide deck as well. So any other comments on that?
I can always make up a comment. Dan.
Yeah,
What were you going to say, Christine?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Actually, you raised a point. So just for the startups in the room, who's a full blown out waterfall on their cap table built out? Womp, womp, womp. So I literally just talked to your point, had a conversation with one of our partners who's a major PE firm, and they're sitting there they're looking at acquiring, writing a $20, $30 million check. They asked the founder for a nice little waterfall analysis of everybody on their cap table. And they're like, what? There is an element of this about good corporate hygiene that we preach at the Science Center all the time. And this ties all into that. So in the case you made, if you're able to say, I have this fractional team, the specific expertise and milestones and costs, and this is what it buys me, this is how it makes your capital that much more efficient when you give it to me, that's a different story than saying, look at our team and just give me $20 million. So be thinking about those specific milestones and this is about capital efficiency, how you deploy capital efficiently with a team, utilizing scarce resources and expertise in an efficient manner. And that's really the purpose of all this.
Hey, Dan, can we do a quick survey of like the areas that people use fractional talent in just through like,
Great question.
it would just be, I'd be curious to see where most of it lies. Like, so in the finance area, mostly, okay, so CFO, finance. How about regulatory? Okay, so a lot of regulatory. Clinical. What am I missing? Quality. And then
Biz dev and sales.
biz dev, sales, marketing, commercial.
Reimbursement. That's a big one.
So what was the was regulatory?
R&D.
Oh, and R&D. Sorry, R&D. Almost nobody. So is R&D mostly in-house then for everybody, primarily?
Well, makes sense.
It's to some level, R&D is in-house. Yeah, I mean, that makes perfect sense. Okay.
Yes. Are there
So regulatory was the most, I think, that I saw.
Regulatory and finance.
Regulatory and finance. Does that surprise you that was the most?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
No.
Pretty on par with.
Yeah. The reimbursement more and more is just
More is reimbursement.
how do you get the commercial uptick and having a compelling story on that commercial, not just, hey, here's my hockey stick forecast, fortify it. What's your assumption? What's your coding? That anymore is more on point with asking about the regulatory path. Who's going to buy it? Who's going to pay for it? Is it reimbursed? And if you can't demonstrate proficiency there, it's a non-starter for investors.
Well, the reimbursement one's a big one for fractional because you're paying for someone who's got relationships and experience, and they know those panels, they know what to expect. So it's you're really buying some work and expertise in an area that they can help be predictive if you're going to be successful or not.
Okay, we're at time. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, LSI. Thank you, panel members. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Yep.